Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming this afternoon. We're back here again, continuing on with our study from last week. The topic, of course, making void the law. Which law? Of course, it's God's law. So last week we saw some pretty amazing things that's going on in the world in regards to this. Human rights. We've been discussing them. We'll do more of that today. What are human rights? Where they come from? Who penned them originally? And what they're doing around the world as this law. So we'll make a start. Before we do that, we'll have a quick word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your guidance and your love. Thank you for your teaching. Be with us now as we study again this subject and we look at the world through the lens of the Bible and see what's going on, what's out there. What does the Bible say? What does the world say? And how different are they? And is it an issue? Guide us and speak to us now, we pray, in your beautiful name. Amen. All right, so last week we looked at a whole bunch. I'll scroll pretty fast forward through these. We saw all these slides. I think we got to the American military. There we go, here. Remember this one from last week? Condoleezza Rice telling us that Jacobinism and Americanism, and Jacobinism, of course, is the French Revolution. And her statement was that she continues that the Bush administration back then, the Global Democratic Revolution, as it's called, which she says continues the work of the 18th century French Revolution. So the Americas, as we know them, all their presidents, all their military, the whole nation in all its power that it has is there to push the 18th century French Revolution. And we saw what all that meant in our study earlier last week and the week before that. Then we saw the actual American emblem for the American Department of Army, and we saw the same symbolism as was in the Declaration of the first human rights ever written by the French. We saw the Phrygian cap in the middle mast. We see the snake or the serpent above it, and we saw these words, "This well defend." This well defend. It's not a typo, as Rachel thought it was last week. It is definitely saying this well defend. And the question is, I suppose, what is it going to defend? Well, Condoleezza Rice just told us what they're going to defend. They're going to defend the French Revolution. So the powerful United States of America takes the philosophy of the French Revolution and makes it universal. And it's in their emblem of their military. And they will well defend it. They will well defend it. And how does the USA do anything in the world? But by force. They always have done, and this is going to be no different as well. Well, let's have a look. Let's keep going. What does the church have to say about this? What does the Roman Church have to say about this? This is Gaudium et Spes, which is basically an issue of the Second Vatican Council, one of their encyclicals or writings. And it says here, what the papacy has realised is that by constantly enlarging the rights of man. Now, I want you to read between the lines here. The papacy has realised that by constantly enlarging the rights of man, to use the Vatican's own phrase, it can offer ever new moral arguments for the enlarging and the size, scope and power of government. So, what does that say? The papacy says, if we continue to enlarge human rights and push them as an agenda, it'll offer new moral argument that we can enlarge the size of it, the scope of it, and give more power to the governments for it. So you see that the church is really behind this whole concept of human rights. We're going to see a lot more of this as we go on. It's really, really behind it. And don't forget, it was the Roman Church that penned the human rights rules through the French Revolution, and continues to have it. We saw those slides last week about the popes addressing the UN and saying, yes, we're all for it. Yes, this is really good. Yes, we have to have human rights and they have to be done by reason. Remember all that? We'll touch on that again tonight. What else we got here? This is from the Roman Catholic Church, Economic and Political Thought. The following is a long, thorough, though incomplete list of man's rights as they've appeared in various papal encyclicals since 1891. These are some of the new rights that require intervention by government in all aspects of society and economy. I still find it amazing that a religious entity can tell the world what to do. And this, of course, the Roman Church is not just a religious entity, which is what we learnt in Daniel. It's a religio-political entity. It's both. That's why in Daniel it says, this beast that I saw was different from the others. The others were just political powers. This one's different. It's actually both. And this is what it's pointing to. So here's this religious authority, this very powerful religious authority, telling governments that there's new rights that have to intervene by government laws. And this is the list of them. This is the list of human rights that we have so far. Right to freely founding unions, working people, right to culture, right to immigrate, right to immigrate, right to food, right to clothing, right to rest, right to medical care, right to a just wage, right to life, safe environment, personal security of workers, family life, private property, common use of all goods. That's interesting. Work, a pension, insurance for old age, associated securities, bodily integrity, necessary social services, right to strike, right to choose a state of life freely, the right to run a family, the right to education, to employment, to good reputation, to respect, to appropriate information, and so on. Privacy, freedom, rightful freedom, professional training, adequate health care. So that sounds good. These are good things. I believe these are good things. But what if in this list of really good sounding things for the human race, there's a catch we can't see? What if? Well, let's see. The British Prime Minister in 1874, Mr. W.E. Gladstone, again, Gaudium et Spes, which is the Second Vatican Council wording, says the complex circumstances of our day make it necessary for public authority to intervene more often in social, economic and cultural matters. Did you get what that said? Yep. It's complex circumstances of our day make it necessary for public authority to intervene in social, economic and cultural matters. How does public authority, what even does that mean? Well, yeah, doesn't it? Okay, so, and look at this comment here from the British Prime Minister back in the day. Individual servitude, however abject, will not satisfy the Latin Church. The state must also be a slave. So he's not... Profound comment. He's not too keen about the idea, is he? That the church is throwing this stuff at them. And yet, for him to say that, what does that mean?
He was a Protestant, wasn't he?
He was a Protestant.
England was still at that time.
Well, England was a Protestant nation. They broke away from the church.
Yes.
As we'll see, the Queen of England stands for the head of the Church of England. Nothing to do with the Roman Church, and yet we're going to see a little mix-up with that pretty soon. But for him to say that the state must be a slave, he knows, Stuart. He knows that he hasn't got a say in the matter. Isn't that interesting? That very statement says that, oh, crikey, nothing's going to satisfy that Latin Church. We have to be their slaves as well. Wow. British Prime Minister. This so-called freed land, broken away from that Roman iron anarchy and hierarchy. And yet here he is admitting that, frustration. Frustration. All right, I found that really interesting. Okay, so let's see how human rights behave with God's commandments. All right, because the Roman Church said that human right laws must be God-given. Remember we learnt that last week? We're going to have human right laws, but they must be God-given, said the papal system. Well, let's see if they fit in with God. Let's look at them one by one with the commandments. Here's the first commandment. I am the Lord thy God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay? That's the first commandment according to the Bible. Now, we read in the Catechism that the whole business about brought the out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, is removed from their first commandment. And they just left, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay? Well, what does the January February issue of the magazine called The Humanist have to say? I'm convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith. Wow. A religion of humanity, that's interesting, that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being.
Wow.
Righto.
New faith, divinity of every human being.
Righto. Interesting stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
religion of humanity. They got it right though, because basically it is a battle that's waged in the classroom. Like when the Bible says that, teach them in the way, and they'll walk in that way as children. That's the thing. You get all the kids on board when they're the most programmable ages.
Yep.
And give them your theology.
Absolutely. With the first commandment, by the way, what if you're a government system and you wanted to embrace Hinduism and Zoroastrianism and Buddhism and all the other religions that don't acknowledge the one God that brought them out of the land of Egypt? How's this first commandment going to work with that system, that government system? Because those religious people don't believe in this God that brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of a house of bondage. You see why some of the commandments have been changed or taken away? Because if you've got a governmental system that wants to embrace these other faiths, which they do, the first commandment's got to go. It doesn't fit. It can't. Because if you remove this section through here, Egypt and the house of bondage, then the portion that remains becomes generic. And it can be used for all other faiths. Stephanie?
There's some interesting points in the bit about what theologians call divinity in every human being is what the devil was saying in the Garden of Eden, you shall be as gods, first of all.
Exactly
The other thing about the theologians could be Thomas Aquinas,
yes,
with his theology of the common good,
yes,
which we're seeing in society now,
yes, yes,
which doesn't allow room for the individual.
That's right. We're going to see some quotes from Thomas Aquinas a bit later on.
Okay.
In our schooling system today, question, is God of the Bible taught in schools exclusively or all other religions embraced as equal? Equal, totally. Also, to say that one deity is higher than another is regarded as hate speech, is it not? So, new human rights laws state, thou shalt regard all deities as equal. This grossly negates the first commandment. Pretty clear. All right. The Christian Institute in a secular world. Not sure if those two things can go together in the same sentence, but they are. This is old information, 2003, but it's good to go back because this is where these things started and we're living in them now. What have we got here? New equality laws substantially restrict religious liberty. Interesting. And it goes through and tells you what they are. But down here, what is really interesting down here, this Professor Ian Lee of Durham University, a leading human rights lawyer, said today, the government regulations have all the potential to seriously undermine freedom of association for religious people. They place the modern concept of equality over and above religious liberty. So they themselves see there's a problem with this. And yet these are the laws that are in. So you might say, no, this is my deity and I cannot conform to any other, because if you do, you're going against human rights. You can't say that. You can't say that today. And this lawyer knows it, and he's quite well said it there. All right, second commandment. There it is there. It's quite a large one. Thou shalt not make your unto thee any graven images or likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or is in the earth beneath, or is in the water under the water. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord God, a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and fourth generations, them that hate me, and showing mercy to the thousands that love me and keep my commandments. That commandment we saw is totally removed from the Roman Catechism. It's just not there. And it stands for good reason, as we'll see in a minute. What does the Roman Church say? This is number 1161 of the Catechism, which reinforces doctrine of the Seventh Ecumenical Council of Nicosia. Following what they have to say, it says, following the divinely inspired teaching of our Holy Fathers and the tradition of the Catholic Church, note there's no mention of the Bible at all, we rightly define with full certainty and correctness that, like the figure of the precious and life-giving figure of the cross, the venerable and holy images of our Lord and God and Saviour Jesus Christ, our inviolate Lady, the Holy Mother of God, and the venerate angels or the saints and the just, whether painted or made of mosaic or any other suitable material, are to be exhibited in the holy churches of God, on sacred vessels and vestments, on walls and panels, on houses and on streets. You can't have the second commandment and have that. So it's got to go. So if you take the second commandment and attach it to modern law of hate speech, you're not allowed to criticize what others do, like saying that idolatry is evil. You can't do that. Then you're contradicting the human rights of that person. So the second commandment's got to go. Easy. Just get rid of it. Interesting. Daniel 7:25. Daniel 7, it's not going to be on the screen, so dig your Bibles out. Daniel 7:25. What does that say? Daniel 7:25. What does that say? And we're going to go to Revelation 13:3 as well. So who's got that one first? Mick, you got it? Let's hear it.
He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. Okay, he shall intend to change times and law. That's what we're talking about here. What does Revelation 13:3 say? 13:3. Especially the last part, the last sentence actually. Who's got that? Somebody?
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wandered after the beast.
And all the world marvelled or wandered after the beast. We're going to see that a bit more clearly as we go on. Second commandment gone, for a good reason, they say. Third commandment, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold guiltless that taketh them in vain. The law against blasphemy. And we learnt in John and in Mark what the Bible calls as blasphemy. Jesus answered and said to them, saying, for a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, because thou hast been a man, makest thyself God. And in Mark, of course, he says, why doth this man speak blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God only? They're the two accounts of what blasphemy is in the Bible with regard to the third commandment, not taking the Lord thy God in vain. Well, let's have a look at what the Roman Church has to say about the third commandment. The Pope is of so great dignity and so exalted that he is not a mere man, but if it were God and the vicar of God. This is the Ecclesiastical Dictionary, which is a Roman Catholic source. What else have we got here? God himself is obliged to abide by the judgment of his priests, and either not to pardon or to pardon according as they refuse or give absolution. The sentence of the priest proceeds and God subscribes to it. Dignities and duties of the priest. That's basically the instruction manual for a priest. And what it's saying here is that the priest has the right to absolve or pardon sin, and God has to agree with it. Interesting.
I've watched a few movies, and they, if I remember right, the old kings and the old movies set in the old times would say, "And as it is written, so it shall be."
Mhm.
That sort of thing. They seem to be, doing the old royal kingly thing.
The royal kingly thing's happening here, Neil, in a big way. In a big way. So here is a power. And what did we read in Daniel? He shall change things and laws, and the world shall wonder after him. This is very interesting stuff, because we're seeing this happening. Here's a power that says, I am another deity on earth, and God has to follow me. That's what it says. It's pretty clear. Okay, that's fine. You might say, well, you know what? That's the religious world. That's that particular faith. Who cares what they say? The world is not going to follow them. Oh, okay. Well, let's have a look at this here. Popular issues. Public prayer in schools. When was prayer in public schools outlawed? Did you know that? Public prayer is not allowed in public schools. The US Supreme Court issued 2 bans on prayer in public schools. The first ban in 1962 and the second in 1963. Bans were a result of a court case sponsored by, in part, this Madeleine Murray O'Hare. She was but one of the litigants in the lawsuit, but her name became synonymous in the case and the promotion of atheism. Well, there you go. The ban not only outlawed prayer in public schools, but it also banned Bible reading in public schools. So does the world follow this religious system?
A little bit later in the 60s, we used to have public religious instruction at a public school I went to, primary school.
Yep. What year was that, Neil?
I'd say late 60s,
Yep.
if I can remember.
Yep,
About
okay.
62 and
This is the US, of course, and
yeah.
perhaps not all the nations are caught up or doing it just the same, but when the US sneezes, the world usually catches a cold, so it passes on. Rachel?
One of the things that you actually see happening now is, yes, they've taken 10 Commandments out of schools, they're stopping prayer in schools, but now the kind of things that they're actually bringing in is things called like the after-school Satan Club.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
That's right.
Very good.
So still pushing, religion or belief structures,
Yep,
just that it can't be Christian in nature.
Yep. Well, we saw in this studies, a few studies ago, about the trans folk going into schools and kindergartens and reading them stories and stuff. That's legal here in this country right now. So human rights has negated the law of God completely. Here's from the Convert's Catechism of the Catholic Doctrine, which is going back to 1957, but nothing changes with that. And the questions are asked: which is the Sabbath day? Saturday is the Sabbath day, says the Church. Oh, okay. Why do we observe Sunday instead of Saturday? We observe Sunday instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. Oh, okay, well that's pretty good, because we're looking at the fourth commandment now, right? Sabbath. What else? The Catholic Record, September 1923. Sunday is our mark of authority. The Church is above the Bible, and this transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that. Okay, it's interesting. What else have we got? Of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change was her act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power, says Cardinal Gibbons. We saw him a little bit previous speaking as well. This is quite an interesting one. This is from the Chancellor of the Archdiocese of Baltimore. If Protestants would follow the Bible, they should worship God on the Sabbath day, and keeping the Sunday, they are following a law of the Catholic Church. That's pretty clear, isn't it?
But he hasn't got his job now.
Jim Gilmay's Shia, the American Catholic Quarterly Review, says Protestantism, in discarding the authority of the Roman Church, has no good reason for its Sunday theory, and ought logically to keep Saturday as the Sabbath. Okay, there's the Roman Church telling the Protestants which day they're supposed to keep for the Sabbath. What else we got? Not the creator of the universe in Genesis 2:1-3, but the Catholic Church can claim the honour of having granted man a pause to his work every 7 days. There you go. The church gives us a Sabbath rest, not the God of the universe. Reason and common sense demand the acceptance of one or the other of these alternatives. Either Protestantism and the keeping holy of Saturday, or Catholicity and the keeping holy of Sunday. Compromise is impossible, says the Catholic Mirror. They got that right? Which one's it going to be? This is interesting. Note the date. I know it's a while ago, but look at the words used here in this newspaper article by Pope John Paul II in 98. A person who violates the sanctity of Sunday is to be punished as a heretic. Now that sort of word was used back in the 1700s, not in the late 1900s, almost 2000s, which goes to show that it's still very much part of their doctrinal belief. Yes, Paris.
Leopards do change its spots.
Leopards don't change their spots. Paris, no, they don't.
That's a British newspaper.
Yes, it is.
Sunday Times.
Yes. Well, actually, it's the Detroit News, so I'd say they have it's the American version of it, I would say. So there's no real change going on there, is there? Interesting. What's this? This is straight from the Vatican itself. Most Christians assume, this is amazing, most Christians assume that Sunday is the biblically proved day of worship. The Roman Catholic Church protests that it transferred Christian worship from the biblical Sabbath to Sunday, and that to try to argue that the change was made in the Bible is both dishonest and a denial of Catholic authority. If Protestantism wants to base its teaching only on the Bible, it should worship on Saturday. Wow, that's straight from the Roman Church's writings. Rachel?
I appreciate that at least they're honest about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even Catholics can't even read this. They don't even want to read this. Like, it's there, and you say, there it is. And they're like, no, it's not there. They just say, oh, well, Sunday's the day because that's the day Jesus rose from the dead. So the date's changed.
And yet their own fathers say that this is the reasons.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, Nick, isn't it? Interesting. All right. So some say that the law, the Ten Commandments, were just an Old Testament thing. That's what they were. We've done away with them. But we're in the New Testament now. We're in the new times. We're post-Christ. We don't need the Old Testament in the Bible at all. Therefore, the laws are all gone. Well, it's surprising to find that every single one of the Ten Commandments are in the New Testament. The first, the second, the third, the fourth, right through the 10th, right through Romans, Ephesians, Matthew, James, John. These are all New Testament books. And the Ten Commandments are there right through the New Testament. They are not done away with, as some may like to think they are. Also, the character of God and the character of the law. The character of God here in the New Testament, again, because a lot of even Christians say that, even God's obsolete now, it's Jesus. Jesus is the God we need to be following now, not the God of the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament wasn't a very nice God. He authorized all this killing of children and women and villages. It was not nice. But Jesus is all about love. So we don't follow the old God of the Old Testament. We follow Jesus. This is the most Protestants' belief. Well, the character of God in the New Testament is just, true, pure, light, faithful, good, spiritual, holy, truth, life, righteousness, perfect, and forever. And the character of the law is exactly the same things, all found in the New Testament as well. It's irrefutable that you cannot delete one or the other. God and law are linked together. They cannot be separated. The law is God's character. All right, fifth commandment. Honour thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord God thy God giveth thee. All right, how are we doing with this one in the world? Well, Homeschool Legal Defence Association and parental rights. In the March 2006 court report says, parental rights, why now is the time to act? We should start with the question, why did the founders, this is the American founders of the Constitution, Why the founders neglect to include parental rights in the text of the Constitution or Bill of Rights? No one would ever envision a form of government that pitted fit parents against the state over the right to make decisions concerning their children. So these groups are saying now, well, there's something wrong with our system. Why wasn't this put in our constitution that parents have rights over their kids? Well, no one expected that it would go this crazy. Obviously, it's a huge change what's going on here. Honour your father and your mother. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, let's have a look at these guys. UNCRC, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Did you know there was such a thing? There's a UN Convention on the Rights of a Child. And this is interesting. If this treaty becomes binding on the United States, the government would have the power to intervene in a child's life for the best interest of the child. Currently, the government can intervene in this fashion only by going to court and proving that parents have been abusive or have neglected their children. This means that whatever the UN-dominated social services system thought that your parental choice were not the best, the government would have the power to override your choices and protect your children from you. If this treaty becomes binding, all parents would have the same legal status as abusive parents. Wow. Because the government would have the right to override every parental decision if it deemed the parent's choice contrary to the child's best interest. Specifically, spanking would be banned under the express terms of the UNCRC. Moreover, children would be required to be taught in a religiously tolerant manner. This has been since passed, and it's got us where we are today. Rachel?
I mean, we do see a lot of these things already in our world, and that could be in the sense of, like, I've heard that parents have lost access to their child.
They have.
Because they didn't want to do chemo on the child.
Okay.
And so because they wanted to try other methods, they took the child away.
Yep. Yep.
And also now we see too that in Victoria, you can't talk to, you have to be, what's it, that trans thing where you're like saying agreement in, what's it called?
To have someone intervene with you?
You're not allowed to talk to them about the other side of the fence or the issues that may arise.
Yes,
you have to only be gender affirming. That's
okay, gender affirming. Yeah.
Gender affirming.
Okay.
Otherwise you can lose your child.
Stephanie?
Australia had the situation where Aboriginal children were taken off their parents. It's called the stolen generation.
That's because of human rights laws.
It's still going on in a sense of things.
It is in a sense of things, Neil, yeah. So that list of human rights we saw, they're all good, right? But what sort of sting are we seeing within those rights and those laws? You see what we're seeing going on? This is quite amazing.
I see that if you want to teach your children about God, and that is going to be hate speech.
Yes,
they're going to
it is.
children from you.
It is.
And
correct.
That's the scary part.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right. It's difficult to assimilate that, isn't it?
Yeah. UNCRC human rights put parental rights lower than child rights. So the parents' moral teaching to their children has zero impact according to human rights laws. This is a complete reversal of God's fifth commandment. Satan's good at reversing God's things, isn't he? The fifth commandment was, honour thy parents, the father and the mother, and the law says, no.
The sad thing is too, when you read that to somebody, when their parents haven't been worth honouring.
Yeah.
You know, there's terrible situations for some kids.
There are, and you can see that, and that's true. And in some aspects, those children need to be protected from that.
Yes, yeah.
But that moral decline of the family unit has come because of these laws. You see? Because it's been strayed away from God's laws, the moral decline has brought on these problems in the family and the family unit, which is really sad.
Godlessness in families. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sad. All right. We've done the first 5 commandments. They're already basically not the biblical commandments. And yet, the papal system said that these human rights laws must be of God, otherwise they're not going to be good. We've just seen the first 5 not of God. Interesting. Stephanie?
Is it fair to say that the government may consider itself to be the true parents of children?
Well, according to that, yeah, according to what this says here, it says the government can override. The government would have the right to override every parental decision.
Is that the fact with like the straw man, like your birth certificate?
Yes.
It's basically like that's the ownership of the government over you and your children.
We're gonna look a little bit into that. The straw man's an amazing setup, which a lot of people don't understand. All right, 6th commandment: thou shalt not kill. Well, that's pretty obvious, right? How's the world doing with that one? This is from an article about a family crisis in the United States. The Family Research Council recently published a collection of essays entitled 50 Years After the Declaration. So 50 years on, they look on and see, okay, how are we doing with our laws? Are they working for us? What are we doing? United Nations Record on Human Rights. In the book, nearly 24 experts roundly criticise the recent social policies of the UN as they relate to women, abortion and children's rights. Teresa Wagner, the editor, charges that the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights has become a tool to advance abortion, homosexuality, euthanasia and other destructive causes. Human rights, they're good for people, right? They're a good list of laws. But what if there's a sting amongst them that we're not seeing? Seeing quite a lot of stings here, which is interesting. So it sounds like human rights may be backfiring, according to Teresa Wagner, not me. This is all quotations. I'm not making this stuff up. All right. How about the 7th commandment? Thou shalt not commit adultery. SIECUS. Sexuality, Information and Education Council of the United States. They've got a council for everything. United States. On parental involvement. Here we go. While it is generally desirable for parents to be involved with their child's contraceptive decisions, the right of each person to confidentiality and privacy in receiving contraceptive information, counselling and services is paramount. What's that saying?
Don't tell your parents. I don't know, not that really, no.
So it's more important to give that person their confidentiality and have a parent telling them you shouldn't sleep around.
Pretty touchy subject.
Touchy subjects. We'll just show them as they are. Rachel?
Maybe this is too how they, because I've heard maybe more so in America, but it probably is happening here too, where with that whole trans agenda that say, you know, the child wants to transition and they don't tell the parents. Yep. So they can use these kinds of clause of sexuality or whatever as a means of not telling the parents.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Basically, I've even heard of like schools having closets. So you can come in and wear the clothes and then you come there and change, be whatever gender, have a new name, but the parents won't even be informed. And they're encouraging that. Human
rights, reason, remember? It talked about man's reason, natural law. We should be governed by that, says the Roman Church that wrote these laws, by the way. Bear in mind, the Roman Church gave these laws to governments to implement. They're not governmental things. They came from, as the Bible says, Revelation 13, and the world wondered after the beast. It's pretty amazing. The 7th commandment in Exodus says thou shalt not commit adultery. That's pretty broad. But if you go to Leviticus 20 and 10 through 21, it gives you greater detail of what adultery really means. It describes sexual adultery, bestiality, homosexuality, gender, sex, gay marriage. It goes into a lot of detail in Leviticus what the seventh commandment really means. And yet, human rights deletes God's seventh commandment completely. This is why schools hand out contraceptives to students without the parents knowing. There are condom vending machines in schools all throughout the country, and they have to be provided by the school, and the parents have no say in the matter at all. All right, how big does this get? Well, here's the White House, lit up in rainbow colours in 2015. Obama was in then. And this ruling is a victory for America, it says. White House lit in rainbow colours to celebrate the new chapter in same-sex rights. Obama says this is a victory for America. This decision affirms what millions of Americans already believe in their hearts. When all Americans are treated as equal, we are all more free.
I believe he was a sort of a social lawyer, we call it, no, solicitor, a lawyer they call it over there.
Yep.
Before he got into the political treadmill.
Yep. Interesting. Well, the media is having a field day for many, many years on his wife, Michelle, actually being Michael, his roomie during university. And so there are, I don't know if that's true or not, but the local media is having a field day over it, and they're absolutely convinced that Michelle Obama is actually Michael.
I've seen some video footage where it looks like there's something swinging down there.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Joan, what's her name? Joan Collins. She was a stand-up comedian. She said something along those lines, and she was dead a week or two afterwards.
Joan Collins, really?
Yeah.
Wow, oh dear.
Joan Rivers.
Joan Rivers.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Joan Rivers.
Rivers.
Yeah.
So, Obama says that all Americans are treated equally and we'll be more free. Free from what?
Free in sin.
Well, free from biblical moral law. Free from biblical moral law, that's right, Trevor.
What did you say, Trevor?
Free to do whatever they want.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It was something.
Yeah. We're not arguing or condemning comparisons here. We're not comparing. We're just looking at what the world does, what the Bible says. We're not condemning, we're not arguing comparisons, we're just stating what God says and what the world says. Yeah? Which are very, very interesting things. Remember, last week we saw that the backup of the Roman Church, which we've identified in Daniel and Romans as to who the beast is, it's identified. The Bible tells us it's clearly the Roman Church. It's not us saying that, it's the Bible saying that. And it is the one who has brought forward these rights, these laws. We're seeing the world is following them. The governments are following them in a very, very real way. And where's that getting the world? Where's the world at without God's moral standard? It's in a pretty bad place. It's in a pretty bad place. All right. What does Seekers have to say? Remember Seekers? We saw him before. Seekers' position statements reveal the following. It is the position of Seekers that the use of explicit sexual materials, sometimes referred to as pornography, can serve a variety of important needs in the lives of countless individuals. All right. So Seekers says that pornography is a good thing and it can serve a need in countless individuals' lives. Okay, that's interesting. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Commandment number 7. What else have we got here? On abortion. This is Seekers as well. Every woman, regardless of age or income, should have the right to obtain an abortion and at a reasonable cost. What a statement from a government system.
In my humble little voice, I thought I'd come upon some wisdom in this life.
Okay.
And it was to know what to do at the right time. Hang on, know what to do, meaning what to do at the right time.
Yep.
And yeah, that's a pretty heavy one, isn't it? You know, like where would it be otherwise?
Neil, this is human right law. You can't speak against this. This is law. It's hate speech if you say anything against this. Be careful, you're being recorded. Rachel?
Well, I will say something against it because that's my nature. You know, you could just take that exact thing and just reword it to say every woman, regardless age or income, should have the right to kill their unborn baby, and at a reasonable cost. And is the murdering of your baby ever a reasonable cost?
Good question.
That's it.
Especially if they haven't got any money.
Stephanie?
I don't know.
I have heard that women who have had abortions, their mental health is affected.
Very, very much so. Even more with gender change folk. Their mental health is usually destroyed for life. Rachel?
Yeah, I agree with what Stephanie's saying in regards to women, that they always, I feel like that abortion is glamorised and almost seen as a form of contraception.
Yes.
But the reality is that women have regret. They carry guilt and shame throughout their whole life. They suffer from mental health issues, suicide, self-harm, drug abuse, and it causes much harm, not just for the baby, but for the mother and perhaps the father and others that are connected as well.
It's not always the mother that suffers. Quite often the father does too. We don't usually hear their side of the story, but yeah, very much so. Mick?
Yeah, I was going to say, they have put a price on the human life there.
They have.
That price is only a couple $100.
Yes. It's a reasonable cost.
I think it's actually a lucrative business that they make a lot of money off of them.
Millions. Billions, not millions.
And I'm also thinking about, you know, they have different serial killers who compete with each other, and they'd be like, well, this guy killed this amount, and they nuclear someone and give up a very large number, and they're giving those guys a run for their money.
Yeah. And yet these centres are killing. I had the stats, it was like...
There's somewhere between 30 and 60 million abortions, legal abortions in the world in a year.
There you go.
And then there's illegal ones on top of that.
Which is probably triple. Rachel?
Yeah, like Paris said, it is a lucrative business, and that is not just from the actual cost of abortions or the subsidies that they may get, but the selling of those parts to big pharma, because then they use it in vaccines and creams and all this kind of stuff. Like some of the creams you buy in the shops, they're like made from children's bits, but you don't know that.
It's pretty grotesque when you break it all down like that, isn't it?
Completely grotesque.
Wow. Seeker's position. Human rights totally negates biblical moral law. In human rights, if human rights is based on natural law, which we learnt that it was in our last week's lesson, then a society will decide based on reason what is natural. I don't see how that information on abortion is actually natural. Anyway, on pornography, adults should have the right to access to sexually explicit materials for personal use. Legislative and judicial efforts to prevent the production or distribution of sexually explicit materials endanger constitutionally guaranteed freedoms of speech and press. Did you get that?
How come they will book you, you know, if they find there's pornography going on, that the police will come in and you'll be charged, and yet they've got this right?
Most of it's like child pornography, though.
Oh,
Not adult.
Yes, right.
So legislatively, governmentally, if you try to prevent production or distribution, it's against freedom of speech.
Well, that's quite true.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going to not agreeing with it, but
Yes.
that is quite true.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
if somebody takes the moral high ground and says, "Oh no, you can't have pornography,"
Yes,
but then turns around and says, "I want religious freedom." You
Yes, yes, at the same time.
know? You know, like you can't have both.
Wouldn't it only be true as a fiat? Is that the word they use when the king says something?
Correct,
And
fiat.
it's supposed to be as it really...
Correct.
I don't know what it's supposed
Fiat means you're under my jurisdiction. Yes.
to be. Right.
One of the things that
That's what the Pope drives in a Fiat Pope-mobile, by the way. Rachel?
One of the things I think about when we talk about pornography is I do think about like sex trafficking, and I think about child sexual abuse, because a lot of pornography, even though it may appear consensual between adults, it often actually isn't. People are in forced circumstances where they are forced to do the acts that they're partaking in.
Absolutely.
And so what human rights are the boundaries there that you're creating, even if it is the fact of that these people have got horrible circumstances, so therefore they feel pushed into doing it just because of financial obligations that they, you know what I mean, there's no other choices for them.
Yeah.
But then also too, this kind of thing where it says adults, you know, that we can't stop the distribution, to me that's horrendous as well, because I just think about all this child, you know, this instilling of all of this abuse of all these people that are trafficked and forced, or that perhaps just have had abusive backgrounds and a low economic status and are basically forced into this.
You're right, I didn't have any stats here, but there are many that comes young up and coming stars like singers and actors. They are definitely forced through this industry as part of the initiation, or as part of the, you want to get up there, this is what you have to do. There's all that involved in the system as well. It's pretty crazy. If you speak against a person's personal lifestyle today, what are the repercussions? If you spoke against someone's personal lifestyle today, what would be the repercussions?
You could get sued or jailed.
It's pretty serious, isn't it?
And it's changing quick. I remember living up here at an alternative era, you know, a lot of protests against Vietnam and all that sort of thing in Southeast Asia at the time. And you'd hear a bit of news from the city and it'd speak of Feral Cheryl.
Feral Cheryl.
Or something. Cheryl.
Okay.
It was a comedy show or something.
Okay. Oh dear.
Well, if there's any truth in it, it's our feral behaviour as a collective or something that, you know, caused mammal species loss and, you know, tragedy of the Aboriginal outlook on life and stuff.
Human feral behaviour is lawful, according to this.
It's what, pardon?
Human feral behaviour is lawful, according to these rights.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's lawful.
And I think it's an Irish word too. I'm not sure. Feral.
Just some things that come to mind is that it's like this divide and conquer. You know, that you take God away from the reason that the Ten Commandments are there, and then here's man in control over an explanation of the commandments in some ways. You know, it's good, you're given them a background of it all, and a lot of this would make sense. You know, or appear to be good for us as a man's explanation of it all, but the actual implementation of it is just ends up being, you know.
We saw in the previous slides that they themselves are finding error, and they're going, well, hang on, why did we introduce parental rights back in the law? We've got a problem now. Why? What about our what was this one about abortion back here? This one here, Teresa, she says, we've got a problem with it. They're advancing abortion, but it's actually euthanasia and other destructive causes. We've got a problem with these laws.
Then they've got to admit that, oh, hang on, there is a problem. Maybe it's in the way that we're explaining it, because they're not going to, you know, it's pride and whatever, they're not going to try to reintroduce God into it. Maybe we do need God. You know, that's the thing that should be, that they should be aware of. But you take that stubbornness out, and they're not going to be, you know, not going to be incorporating God. They're just going to dig another hole.
That's right. Nick?
Isn't it defamation of character, what you described?
Yeah,
It's the same thing that
Absolutely.
Satan done to God.
Same thing.
It's the same thing that Agassi does to God as well.
Same.
Mm.
Same thing. Same thing. What did Revelation say? And the world wondered after the beast. We're seeing that, aren't we? We're seeing that. Don't forget who implemented these rules. The human rights laws were implemented by the Roman Catholic Church. They put them to the governments to put out there, which is interesting. This is a South African television station. March 2013. Again, it's a bit old, but it's good to go back to where it all started. Top TV has right to broadcast porn. The Independent Communications Authority of South Africa has heard that it has no choice but to allow Top TV 3 porn channels, it reported today. Arguing for Top TV in a public hearing at Isaac's office of Santon yesterday, Advocate Stephen Budlender said ICASA did not have the legal right to refuse the station permission to broadcast 3 subscription porn channels from abroad. He reported, it does not matter what I, the ICASA Council, and political party or any other organisation think about pornography on Top TV. He adds that ICASA, by law, does not have the power to refuse Top TV a licence. In fact, it will actually be unconditional if consent is withheld. Unconstitutional if we hold it back. So the TV station doesn't want it, but they can't do anything about it.
You can see how the devil is behind it. I mean, it's just so smart. No human's that smart.
It's amazing how far it's gone. And this is all under the banner of human rights. Remember, I have to keep saying that because it kind of blows my mind. That list of human rights we saw that was so lengthy all sounded really good.
Yeah.
But this is what they've come to. Rachel?
I was just thinking that, like, when I was younger, you used to always hear about censorship. This should be censored and this kind of thing, like on TV. Now censorship is more just about suppressing truth than actually, like, caring about children seeing things on, like, free-to-air TV at certain times. Whereas before it would be like, you can only show this at this certain time, kind of thing. But now it seems that anything is kind of allowed at any time.
That's right.
And you don't hear about people trying to censor that. You just hear the truth being censored. That's all.
Because human rights are based on what? Natural law and reason. And if a group of people think it's reasonable to provide 3 channels with 24-hour pornography, not just sometime, all the time, that any child or anyone can access, the founders of these councils can't knock them back. Because the law says it would be unconstitutional if we knocked them back.
There was something that we covered a little while ago now that was saying that they were establishing what human law was.
Yes.
I don't think it was the Catholic Church, maybe some human rights organisation. You remember that?
Yeah, which part? Because we did cover that the Roman Church not only wrote it, but backs it up.
Yeah, what the human law was.
What human law was?
Yeah.
Human law, they say, is based on natural law.
Oh, sorry, natural law.
Natural law, yeah. And natural law is what? We never really got to the bottom of it. Because it was backed up by several comments of the Roman Church saying that natural law is what it should be. It should be based on reason. Society should choose how a law should go according to their conditioning and what their surroundings are like. They should choose how the law should be. It shouldn't be governed by certain people or persons.
Natural law is if it feels good, do it.
Yes. Yes.
So everyone can make their own decision.
And we saw that quote from the papal system itself saying this is a good thing. This has got to come from God.
But now you just said that human rights are based on, or it was just so that human rights are based on natural law.
Yes, and reason. Yeah. Paris?
I was thinking that the laws seem to be about what they think society wants, but they're kind of manipulating society for the outcome.
Yeah. Good comment. Maybe.
It's actually kind of funny. I saw like this, just a little tiny video on social media, and someone was just interviewing someone, and they said, "Do you think it's okay to transition?" And they said yes to Christianity.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then they're like, no.
Oh, wow.
And that's the thing, it's really pushing. You're allowed to do anything you want as long as it's not Christianity.
That would have been a lead balloon, that one. Okay. So no choice. The South African nation has signed to these human rights laws, and any nation that has, that's why these things can get passed. Because human rights says, yes, you can. It's based on natural law, and like we saw earlier, that if a person sees the need and it's good, okay, do it. Like Stuart said, if it feels good, do it. So what the Bible teaches becomes problematic against natural law, yeah? And human rights are completely opposed to God's moral law. When the papal system said that human rights must be God-given, remember that statement we read last week? Then they're absolutely not talking about the God of the Bible. It's quite clear. So it must be another deity they're talking about. Remember that quote we saw? Stephanie, you want to say something?
I think the Church of Satan, like the Sectarian belief is to thine own self be true, or something like that, something along the lines of what we're seeing here.
Yes, well, it all kind of comes into play, doesn't it? And no matter what angle you look at it.
To me, well, I guess it's manipulation, but to me, if human rights and the moral laws are really genuinely looking after society, they would want them to look at both sides to make a intelligent decision.
That's a good point, Trevor.
And by doing this, they're saying, no, you can't look at the other side.
That's exactly
So
right.
they're stopping making an intelligent decision,
That's exactly right.
defeating their own purpose.
So therefore, it's no longer based on natural law.
No.
It's no longer based on, if a group of people think that's going to work for them this way, we should do it. Well, here's a group of people that says it should work this way. They're being pushed aside, and this narrative is taking over. So it's really not social justice at all, or natural law, or reason, and yet it's pushed that it is.
Only in name.
Only in name. Rachel?
I just wanted to agree with Trevor, because you see that
Yeah.
on a whole spectrum of different topics, and really they only allow you to see one perspective.
One side.
There's more than two perspectives. There's
Sure.
multiple perspectives. And how can we choose? How do we have freedom of choice
Yes.
if we're only given one option?
Yes.
And all the other choices, all the other perspectives are censored, hindered, suppressed.
That's why I say it's no longer natural law then, because it's not for everybody.
There's the accepted narrative, and if you go outside that, then you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting as to, well, who puts that forward? Stuart?
Somebody is. I don't know who it is.
Who puts it forward, and how come we're all following
I
it?
know.
Probably never been challenged.
Never been challenged?
If
The
I-
whole world
if I
wandered
just-
after
if I
the
was
beast?
sliding
They
around
run.
to look at this side and look at that side and make my own compassion, they said, no, you can't. I wonder, could that be challenged in court? Where
Could it
would
be
st-
challenged in
where would
court?
stand?
I think it would stand nowhere,
Not
because the
a
law
chance.
says otherwise.
That's right, but it's a Roman power, isn't it?
It is.
A world power.
Yes, it is.
Right. Now, previous it was pagan Rome.
Yes.
Okay, and
Yes.
we've just talked about, it's papal right now. But they're sort of hidden in a lot of ways as far as being recognised as a world power.
They are.
Well,
Very
look
much
at
so.
But they are.
In the last
They're hidden to the general public eye, but it's not hidden here.
No.
in
The
the last,
law follows Roman law today.
No, that's right. They're very, they've got their egos about it all, and they've got that ability to be able to, put it in print, but people don't
No,
pay attention.
the general people don't know.
in the last 10 years, I'd say almost every world political leader and tech giant has had private, kind of audience. with the
Absolutely.
Pope. Like he doesn't. They don't go and see the SDA president or the Anglican, whatever he is.
We saw that in the images that I showed a few lessons ago. We saw the Google greats and the Facebook greats having private interviews. Having private interviews. We saw all that in our previous lectures. You can see them online. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing stuff.
I thought of one, looking at the fact that it's South Africa.
Yes.
I read a story, a little bit of a history, I can't remember exactly where. And when they got down there, like it's a sort of long way from the North Africa, they found gold basically on the beaches. It was washed down the river. It wasn't a real valued thing, so they could just sort of pick up real wealth. And the Bible teaches this. It's probably a not a moot point or anything legal like that. I don't know exactly what that means, but it says, as we behold, so we become.
Okay.
So if they're beholding the gold and then, put the flag in, build a new settlement there and open the gold mine, it's almost as if we're looking at Nebuchadnezzar's statue.
Pretty much.
Collecting the gold off the, sparkling bit of sand on the beach.
So Neil, putting that into perspective of what this is all about.
Yeah, well, we're beholding something else.
You think we're putting a flag in this as well and beholding this as well? Stephanie?
During the French Revolution, the people were given the goddess of reason
yes.
to worship in place of God,
Yes.
because God was still with.
We saw that last week, which is what continues on from that. I showed all that last week, the goddess of reason, which is where all this has come from. Remember what Condoleezza Rice said? We, the American people and government, will uphold the French Revolution ideology. And we're seeing it globally. Globally. And Australia is no different. We are under the same human rights law acts as the rest of the world. So all this applies to us as well. Let's move on. 8th, 9th and 10th commandments. Well, we kind of know that they are there. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife, or his maidservant, or his manservant, or maidservant, or his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbour's. Okay, God says in the 10 Commandments that you can have ownership and control over these items and no one else may covet them. Is that what it says? Or am I making it up? Does that say that God says we have ownership and control over these items and no one else can covet them?
No, it was the other way around. Only you shall not cover.
Yeah, but it says that you have ownership and control over these items and no one else can covet them. Covet your items. Is that what that says?
You're allowed to own a few things.
You're allowed to own quite a few things. You're allowed to own a house. You're allowed to have a wife or a husband. You're allowed to have workers, manservant, maidservant. You're allowed to have implements and animals and transportation, an ox, an ass, and you can't. Well, yeah, that's what it says here. That's what it says here, right? Yeah. All right.
But
Interesting.
You can buy them off them.
You can buy them off them if they want to sell them to you.
I think it sounds like a very formula for a happy,
Is that a fair?
Because they're having a rest on Saturday as well.
Is that a fair formula, Neil? You reckon for humanity?
Is
that a fair formula?
I think it's the 10th commandment, like literally speaking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is it a fair formula for humanity?
I don't want to bite anyone's dog back.
Okay. Rachel?
Well, in response to what Neil's saying, it is fair. Like, I think that's the thing about God. Like a lot of, I guess the mainstream, and this was kind of my first perceptions of God, is that he's just this mean tyrant. But his law serves us. It serves one and all so that we can be in unity together, that we can live together in harmony and get along. So, yeah, I think that it is great. His laws, it is my delight to do his law. And when I don't, it does me wrong, and it does others wrong as well.
All right. Well, let's see what the Roman Church has to say about it. Rerum Novarum, which is the encyclical of Pope Leo, back in the day. This was to all the bishops and patriarchs and so on and so forth of the highly apostolic see. Rights and duties says, for every man has by nature the right to possess property as his own. Sounds good, right? That's like 10 Commandments. That's awesome. Until this fella come along. Thomas Aquinas. Stephanie, you mentioned him earlier on. He was a long time ago, 12th century. Who's this guy? Well, he's a philosopher, he's a theologian, he's a doctor of the church. They called him Angelicus Doctor. Patron of the Catholic universities, colleges and schools. Thomas Aquinas was an Italian Dominican friar and priest, an influential philosopher and theologian, and a jurist in the tradition of scholasticism from the country of Aquino in the kingdom of Sicily. Thomas was a prominent and natural theology and father of the school of thought known as Thomism. Thomas Aquinas was also a Jesuit. Funny how that comes up every time, doesn't it? It's just really funny. Okay, so what's the big deal? Who's this guy? What does he have to say? So he worked for the church. Yeah, he was a philosopher, he was a theologian. He was called the doctor of the church. Wow, that's a pretty big title. What could that mean if he's a doctor of the church?
Speaking authority.
Great authority, speaks for them.
Like a PhD.
Like a PhD. He was right up there in the 12th century, Stephanie. He was it. A patron of the Catholic universities and colleges and schools. So he taught. What this fella taught went through all universities and schools. By the way, the Catholic system of education, or should I say, the global university system of education today is based on this, the Catholic system. That's globally today. All universities, most universities are based on Catholic teaching and the Thomas Aquinas teaching. Rachel?
You could say the Catholic Jesuit system.
Well, it comes back to that again, doesn't it? But yeah. Okay, so what's so important about this guy? Well, this is what he has to say. This is what remember who he was, remember who he is still, because it's still today being used. He's all of this, and therefore he's in the world with his ideologies. This is what some of the stuff he says. It is lawful, says Thomas Aquinas, for a man to hold private property, and is also necessary to carry on human existence. But if the question be asked, how must one's possessions be used? The church, the who? The church replies without hesitation in the words of the same holy doctor, Thomas Aquinas, man should not consider his material possessions as his own, but as common to all, so as to share them without hesitation when others are in need. Common good.
Do what I say, not do what I do.
Reason.
Yes.
Social acceptance. Natural law. Human rights. Can we see what's going on? Remember that list looked good, but might there be a sting in that list? Wow, this is pretty huge. Thomas Aquinas. What else do you say? Well, inside the Vatican, Policy of the Catholic Church, Harvard University, which is a Catholic university, according to canon law, the control of all property of the Roman Church state belongs to the Pope, its supreme emperor. Okay, well that's the Roman Church state, so he owns everything in Rome, apparently. Okay. What's this say down here? Ecclesiastical Magnumania, the economy of political thought of the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic doctrine of private property is echoed in the 19th century communist slogan, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. That's an interesting slogan. Do we get what that means?
If you have need, you can take things that don't
If you have need, you can take it that don't belong to you.
So
Wow.
Can I do that to the top guy out there then?
Well, according to this, you can. If you have need.
Let's see you try.
Let's see you try. So this is just for the commoners, you reckon, Stuart, not for everybody else.
It's the commoner.
Wow. I thought this was supposed to be social law for everybody. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Well, let's have a look. What else did Thomas say? Thomas says, because the goods of some are due to others by natural law. Here we go again. There is no sin if the poor take the goods of their neighbours. Thomas wrote, in cases of need, all things are common property, so that there would seem to be no sin in taking others' property, for need has made it common. Paris, yeah, Thomas Aquinas is definitely Catholic.
Does circumventilating make the commandment?
Circumventilating it, they're wiping that out.
I don't want to speak up for the British, but when COVID started, I found a book on 13th century Britain, and that was spoken as Thomas Aquinas was teaching over there.
Oh, yes.
The same century, and the plague went through.
Yes,
Black plague,
the Black Plague or bubonic, one of the two.
And, yeah, and it kind of went for a century or more.
Yep.
And it was a shocking read. It was like, ugh.
Yeah.
Terrible, like,
And this guy had something to say, did he?
it was a bit of a British sort of book.
Okay.
But I'll try and find the point amongst it all.
Please do.
Yeah, in case of need, apparently British people about that time, not exactly that time, because I'm not a scholar of it or anything, just trying to keep busy. They were getting silk from China through Italy and all these other places, or Rome I should say, but not everybody had silk. And if somebody actually dressed up as someone in silk, like a dandy or something, in the long socks and stuff, they could be put in jail or worse or something. I kind of flipped over those pages, but I made myself.
Well, you can see why that was happening, because this is what this guy says. And then what's interesting about that is that you said in Britain, now let's not forget who England was. She broke away from the Roman system, and the Queen is the head of the English Church. And yet here's Thomas Aquinas, a Roman Catholic philosopher, theologian, telling the Brits, wow, it kind of blows your mind, doesn't it? Mick, you say something?
I was just going to say, I mean, this is all well and good, as long as I can move next door to the Vatican and then just pop next door.
Pop in and take stuff.
And pinch some gold until I'm satisfied. I mean, that's what it's saying.
Well, it is. It's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So where's this leading to, by the way?
Chaos.
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 This has happened in South Africa, where people's farms were taken from them.
Yes. We're touching on that in this lecture.
Also in the times we're living in, you have seen it evidenced in America when they've had the big riots and they just go into shops and loot them. And
they were looting shopping centres, taking in brief suitcases and walking out, and the police were standing by the door watching them go. Because of these laws. They had need, Mr. Supermarket owner, so they can rid your shelves and fill their suitcases and walk out with plasma televisions as well. Wow. Human rights, common law. We're going to have to finish up there.
But even too, it's like, who really actually even needs a TV?
Well, if you have need of it, you can take it.
That's open to interpretation.
I think they might have.
You can live without it. You know, you can't live without food. You can't live without water.
They can't do anything. They can't do anything.
Who knows about Santa Claus, but there could be some clause or something like that.
Some clause somewhere. That's why shoplifting laws now are pretty much gone. And shop owners and large department stores just pay massive insurance rates, and our food costs and item costs go up to cover it, because you can go and shoplift today by law if you have need. According to human rights, natural law, reason. Yeah? Isn't that incredible?
It sounds a bit like a banana farmer not putting a fence around his patch. So if someone's going past and they're a little hungry.
No banana patches of the fence.
No banana plant. Yeah, that's it. You said it, man. That's it.
Let's. Any questions? We'll close in prayer. Thanks for the banana. That's great. We'll close in prayer. Thank you, dear Lord. Thank you so much. Wow, what is going on? Is Is this real? Are we really seeing these quotes? Is this really going on in the world? Seeing God's moral law just literally thrown aside, and look at the outcome. Even those in power, in those places of departments, are saying there's something wrong here. It's not good. It's not good. Well, Lord, we ask for your guidance continually in our lives to understand and do what is good, to follow you in your way. Help us to do so, and may these studies bring this to our mind even more. May others come to see as well. As we continue next week, we thank you for being with us, we pray. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Thanks, everybody.